We're live.
Rock and roll. And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. I tell you what, I love that song, by the way. And it was trouble is though, when you're married, you can't sing that really, can you? Do it my way because in my household, my wife is my boss. Oh, but don't tell her, but I am really. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for coming today. This is crossroads.co, and if you listen on radio, welcome. And guess what? We've got a wonderful guest on now called Wendy Panther. And let's go to her. Hello, Wendy. How are you?
I'm good, Steve. Thank you. And yourself?
I'm really, really good. Yeah, yeah. And thank you so much for coming back again.
You're welcome.
Tell everybody about yourself because they probably didn't hear you last time. So,
All right. So a very brief synopsis because there's a lot to fit in. I am Wendy Pather. I am an ex-nurse and an ex-nurse teacher. I am now a relationships coach, and I am I practice the art of shadow alchemy, which is about how we have. So if you go back to the work of Jungian psychologists, it's about how we all have archetypes that that we take on the roles of, that may or may not be a true expression of ourselves, and frequently are not. So we kind of have this mask that we put on, that we live with, and sometimes we start to mistake the fact that we think that we're the mask and we're not. So I think that about sums it. And what I do is I just help people to get rid of the mask, to recognize when the shadows are at play, and to enable them to get rid of it. And on top of that, in the last 4 years, I've been practicing energy alignment, and as part and parcel of practicing that energy alignment, I have had the experience of channeling guides and giving energetic guidance to people when they're open to receiving it. So that's me, really, in a nutshell.
okay, great, great. Let's go to the maths part, what you do. The trouble is, every one of us, sometimes, when we go different places, we always put our mask on and we don't show our true self. Do you agree?
Totally. It was one weekend it was on a training program when I was doing a mentorship training program on Tinos in Greece. Absolutely beautiful setting. It was amazing. And I was sent away to work with this colleague, and we'd got 45 minutes each way, and it ended up taking the full hour and a half, just enabling me to release this mask that I used to hide behind. Because quite simply, if you've got the mask in front of you, when they go talk to the hand, if you're talking to the hand, you're not talking to me. Therefore, if you say something about your hand, oh, it looks a mess, it's not nice, it's not me that you're aiming it at. So therefore, when we put this mask out, it's a protective mechanism to enable us to be accepted, which is part and parcel of shadow alchemy, as being wanted to be part of the tribe, wanted to be accepted as part of the tribe. And so we put on a mask and we pretend to be what we are not. So we will sacrifice our own values. We will sacrifice our own boundaries for the sake of being accepted. And we do that by putting on a mask that is not actually us.
Can that be really, really dangerous?
I don't know about dangerous. It's just not the truth. So what happens is when you are doing that, what you're doing is you're missing out on life, because when you miss it, what you're doing is you're not allowing yourself to expose yourself in your full humanity, in the full vulnerability that it is to be human. And instead, when I'd also previously built a wall around me, as in metaphorical wall, but that's the brain doesn't know the difference between a metaphorical wall and a physical wall, in that's what we put out between us. And so it literally, we just put more and more barriers between us and the other person. And it's dangerous in that it can lead to, we are social beings, we are energetic beings, and interactions, both energetically and socially, are part and parcel of what give us a quality of life. And when you don't do that connection, what you're doing is you're isolating yourself, and it can lead to such things as depression, because you push down the emotions. So you're not expressing who you are, you're not expressing how you really feel, you don't feel that your opinion is worthy, you say the opinion that you think that the other person wants to hear. And yes, there is a danger in that you know, when they give you the description, when you go, I've got to go and find myself, there is a spiritual truth to that if you don't connect with who you are, you kind of just get lost, and you're just floating about in this sea of uncertainty and just trying to please everyone. And when you're trying to please everyone, you end up pleasing nobody, including yourself.
Yeah, we see, that's the trouble though, isn't it? We go around kind of like day by day, you know, in front of people, even you know, if they're guests or if they're customers or whatever,
Yeah.
or even people that who are single, you know, we just go around and you know, we think, oh my God, you know, let's put this mask on, so they don't want to see the real us, do they?
Mm-hmm. And I think, Steve, the thing is that we don't think, oh, I'll put this mask on. It becomes part of what we do because it's out of conscious awareness. And at some point in our early lives, whether it be as a child, or whether it's been in a situation when you felt threatened, so you put this mask on to protect yourself, what we forget then, what it does is it becomes unconscious, and it becomes an unconscious pattern. And whilst it served its use incredibly well at the time that it was originated, it doesn't serve it any longer as you go through your life. And that's the point. So lots and lots of things that we've learned and thought about as children were wonderful while we were children, but they don't serve us whilst we're adults.
Yeah,
Though
I've met people. Sorry,
sorry,
I've met people who one minute they are themselves, and next minute, when there's other people on the scene, their attitude and
yeah,
whatever else changes. You know what I mean? To
yeah.
say I'm the big I am. Say.
Yeah, I can remember it from when my twin sister was married to her first husband, and what us within the family used to see two Lindas. One was the one when she was present with him, and the other one was when she was present with us, and they were two different people. And I think for me, it's about that wherever you are you, and you have value intrinsically just by being who you are, and you have the right to express who you are, and you have the right for other people not to be pleased about it. And as long as you are, and it's very much, we are ingrained as children to please other people. We are ingrained to to do what other people want us to do so that we're accepted. So when we talk about unconditional love, does not exist in the early years as a human, because parents then you start taking on the notion that parents start putting conditions on how you behave, as to whether you get positive feedback, as to whether you then get the responses. So then you kind of go, well, if I behave this way, I'll get this. And I mean, I just watch those dynamics happen between my grandchildren every day. And it's fascinating watching as they come in, and it is part and parcel of the human process. And the saying that you can't put an old head on young shoulders is very, very true. So when we are children, we learn techniques and skills for helping us survive emotionally, physically, psychologically. And we just make the mistake that a lot of parents, unintentionally, I hasten to add, this is not a slur on any parent, because I've been there and I was not the world's best mother, far from it. so it's looking back on the mistakes that I made, is that we then don't allow our children to grow up. And but that's mainly because a lot of the time, psychologically and emotionally, we've not grown up. So how can we expect our children to have a role model to follow when we ourselves haven't worked through that process? And I mean, it's took me till now. So I've worked with it it's kind of, so I I would not dream actually of condemning anybody else for the simple fact that I've been there, I've done that, I've had the t-shirt, and I just thank God that I've started to recognize the traits, the patterns and whatever that kept me embroiled in unhappiness, I think is the best description that I can give it, in that it was in trying to please others, I would then end up disappointed with myself, whether it was because I'd not pleased them or I'd not pleased me. And either way, it wasn't a satisfactory outcome, if that makes sense.
Do we need to please people?
No. We
No.
think we do. It's ingrained in us, and being a people pleaser, and especially a lot of people in counselling, in coaching, in and in therapeutics, in therapies, we try we if you think about codependency, we've been brought up to try to please. So even just as we try to please other people. So just as an example, and this is not his fault, not ever at all, as far as my ex-partner's concerned, is that I would base my decisions on what I thought he wanted, rather than having an adult discussion to ask him. I just made those presumptions because I knew him and I knew him well. But that was me then not doing for me either, and not expressing for me. Whereas if we'd kind of had a straightforward negotiating discussion, then it works it would work both ways, because I know also that he did things just because he thought that it would please me. And he often said, marriage and relationships are about a compromise. Well, I kind of go, yes, they are, but what you can't compromise is yourself, if that makes sense. You can you can adjust your you can adjust to certain things, but I think it's about if the essential thing about having shared core values and shared beliefs, and then the rest you can work around. But if you don't have those, and the thing is, we go into a relationship when we're at a certain age, and then we have more experiences. And as we have more experiences, some of those experiences bring us closer, and some of those experiences take us further away. And some of those experiences mean that we change our values. Some of those experiences mean that we start looking at our personal beliefs and how do they serve us or not serve us, as the case may be. And when you start changing in a kind of any relationship, it's a little bit like a seesaw. Any relationship, if one side changes, inevitably it changes the other side. Now, whether it changes for how they want it to change or not is a very different thing. And what you'll find is a lot of people, when they start in self-development, find that it can be a make or break for relationships. Now, it's not saying that there's anything wrong with the partner. It's simply saying that people grow at different phases, and you've got to be. I think one of the things about being an adult is recognizing that, and it's not always comfortable, I should say, being an adult. And we often look to our partners to be like a parent to us and a support to us. And if they don't support us, we feel angry at them. Well, that's a childish reaction, because in actual fact, it is more about this is an opportunity to have a discussion than it is about saying, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this right.
Yeah. How about the times when we kind of like, when we're in a relationship and we're kind of like, well, we just say we just went to a bar and all of a sudden I met this woman and so on, and all of a sudden I was beefing it up. You know what us men do? We go into a bar, don't we? And we say things, and sometimes we tell the odd porky. The next minute we get found out and everything.
Yeah.
It's like that. Why can't men just go in instead of wearing a mask and putting up a front just to say it as it is?
Well, I would say, and it's quite interesting this, because it's only recently that I've kind of started learning about it, but it is within our society, we have started emasculating the men in our lives. So women, instead of being women, are kind of putting on a mask that's like being a man. So if you think about a woman in corporate, instead of using, we all have kind of masculine and feminine traits within us. And instead of kind of acknowledging the role of the masculine and the feminine, because the men are the leaders, and that is actually part and parcel of how it should be. And many people go, oh my God, how can she say such a thing? But that's the truth of it. The knack then as a woman is that you pick a good man. And if you can't be who you are, we don't even know who we're picking and who we're choosing. If you've got a mask on, we're falling for a mask. We're not falling for the person, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I don't understand it, why women or men do that. You know, why don't they just kind of like come out and just say, take the mask off and say that this is me, you know, and that's it, isn't it?
It'd be wonderful if it was that easy, wouldn't it? I think this is where, you know, when I was talking about I do shadow alchemy, it's part and parcel of that. The reason that we don't do that is we are embroiled in shadow archetypes that in the system that I have been taught. It covers kind of 4 columns, and you can kind of either be in the shadow archetype or the power archetype within each one. And they get together and have a party. I'm convinced of it. So when one's there and working, the others kind of come and back each other up. So the terminology can be a bit strange, but so you've got the kind of the polarities of the prostitute versus the lover consciousness. So this is about areas of self-worth, of feeling worthy, of feeling that you are lovable, that you are worthy of, that people can love you, and it ties in with that about being accepted. So many of us will sacrifice our now, when I say personal truth, it's the truth that goes, I am a human being and I am worthy. It's not a personal truth that goes, I am this and you've got to therefore accept it, because you don't have to accept me as I am or not. The person who truly needs to accept me is me. The person who needs to accept you is you. And when you accept yourself and love and care for yourself, then then you step into that lover archetype. And when I talk about self-love, a lot of us label that as selfish, when in actual fact, if you do not, right, and this is talking spiritual and talking as from a Christian perspective, when Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself, if you are going to love your neighbor, who do you first have to love?
Yourself.
Exactly. And most of us do love our neighbors as ourselves, but we don't like ourselves, so we don't like our neighbors, because everyone that's out there speaking to you is just purely a reflection of your consciousness. So they are representative of some type of energy in you, whether it be, so if I find I get irritated by people because the condescending, then I kind of go, so at some stage, where is it that I am condescending? Because I'll guarantee you there will be somewhere in there that I am, for it to be reflected back at me. And it can be that I'm condescending to myself. It can be that I'm critical to myself. So it's not. So this is why self-love is the first parameter and the first key to actually getting out of shadow consciousness. Because if you don't love and care for yourself, you can't expect others to do the same. And interestingly, and we shouldn't even expect them to do that, because ironically, once we do love and care for ourselves, what you get is this whole sea of love that comes back to you, that is a representation of how you feel. So it's kind of quite possible to when we're talking about energetics, it's quite possible for one person to be there and to be quite happy in a situation because they have this strong core identity, strong core sense of self, that they know that they are utterly worthy just by simply breathing. And then you get someone who takes on the that they will try and please everybody else and do, and it's literally, they're just the two ends of the same scale. And what's interesting is if you step into the power, the draining one, the shadow one, can't exist, because it's literally, it's like two sides of the coin, and whichever one drops, so you can't see both together, and they can't exist within you together. So it's, when you're expressing one, you can't be expressing the other at the same time, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes.
So
yeah.
for a lot of us, it's about learning how to express to accept our power. And a lot of people go through life feeling powerless, because I think it was the Marianne Williamson, wasn't it, that we're scared to accept who we are. I can't remember the name. The thing, a lot of people accredit it to Nelson Mandela, but it wasn't him. He read it out, but it was Marianne Williamson's words. And it is the fact that we are scared of our own power more so than we are. So we then take on the role of powerlessness, because when you step into your power, there is a level of personal self responsibility and self accountability. So it's not about power over others, because nobody else has power over you, and nobody else has. So it's about taking your own power, and in recognizing your own power, you recognize the power of other people. So in that way, it's the kind of thing that that it takes away the notion of victimhood, because if I'm acting as a victim, it's me and it's my feelings of powerlessness that are attracting in my consciousness people that will reinforce that feeling of powerlessness in some way or another, whether it be road rage and somebody comes up and shuts you off and does, or whatever. But it's that, so when you are in your power, even if there is somebody that kind of has a road rage or what, you just kind of go, oh, that's nice for them, and it doesn't bother you. So that's the difference. It isn't saying that strange things in life won't happen anymore, because they always will, because that's part and parcel of the human experience, but it's that they don't affect you in that same way.
Well done. Well done.
And the next kind of, so that's kind of the prostitute lover, so it's about self-love. Then you get the next one of the two is about child and sovereign. So as I said, I think the majority, a huge percentage of the people on the planet are walking around as adults, acting like children. We get into silly arguments, we shout and have screaming matches, we blame other people, we go, it's not fair, so whenever you hear it's not fair, it's when you're in kind of child consciousness, because nobody promised us that life would be fair. And to be honest, we didn't come down into this experience expecting it to be. We came down into this experience to experience life as a human being, and it has many facets. And what we do is, and it was a colleague of mine that came up with this recently, is we act as adults how we perceive adults should behave when we were children, if that makes sense. So we make our decisions as adults based on what we think an adult should, and that word should be removed. That word should be removed from the dictionary. Should be, because when we take on that role of an adult, it's like a child. You know, when a kid comes home from school and plays the teacher.
Yeah.
In many ways, as adults, we are children playing the role that we saw our mothers and fathers play, as opposed to being sovereign, taking accountability for yourself, taking moral responsibility for your decisions, and knowing that you are, I'm going to say being queen of your own kingdom, but being king of your own kingdom and being the master of your own realm is, for want of a better description. So we kind of relegate our decisions to other people. which is what children don't have a choice about. And that's fine when you're only 3, 4, 5 and 10 years old. But as you get to be 30, 40, 50, then your decisions are yours to be owned by you. And whether we make the right decisions or not, because a lot of us still work with, when I talk about the shadow archetypes, we live in shadow, we make decisions from shadow, and that's when we make poor decisions, because we base them from fear as opposed to from that position of self-love, freedom, and self-responsibility.
I got a message here from someone, from James, and it says, "Hi Steve, as you're a Christian, which I am not, do you put a mask on to hide your face?" My answer to you is no. Everybody who comes on my program probably gets told about me. I do not go out saying that I'm a Christian or nothing like that, but I am a Christian. I don't hide anything away. I don't need to prove anything. All I can say to you is this: that God loves you, and so do I, and that's all I say. What would you say, Wendy?
I think that for me, and I was a Christian, but I don't say I am kind of multi is now how I would put it, in that I totally believe that there's a God, totally believe that Jesus existed, totally believe that Jesus was enlightened, and that we all have that spark of enlightenment within us. But that doesn't mean to say that we would live exactly as Jesus lived, because the context of the life that he lived was 2,000 years ago. And he taught, when you actually read the New Testament, and Jesus taught self-love, full stop. Jesus taught you to love and care for yourself. Jesus taught comfort in hiding. It's now been 6 months of wearing a face mask whenever I go out in public. Yeah. It may even be longer. Face masks are actually becoming the new fashion statement, then be found in every store from the local supermarket. Very true. Very true. And yes, I think it's quite ironic that the whole world is putting a mask on. I have to say that I am one of those people that hasn't worn a mask. But in the kind of, and part and parcel of that was, I think at a psychological level, I didn't want to hide behind one. But I do know of my friends and colleagues, one who works in the therapeutic industry, and she was saying she finds comfort in her mask now. She finds it because, I mean, it's kind of weird that she's happy hiding her face from her clients, and because to me, I go, I'm me, take me as I am. I'm misreading that, by the way. I was in the middle of my sentence because I can't read and talk at the same time. Wearing a mask takes away energy from a person's consciousness. Yeah. Masking tendencies can be more obvious when a person is sick or weak, since they may no longer have the energy to maintain the mask. That is very true. Very true. And yeah, I like that. And it's interesting that it's because, again, going back to being a nurse, and it's when people are dying that a lot of the kind of truth, for want of a better word, comes out. It's at that time when people want to make reparations, to let people know that they love their family, that they do care for them in spite of any arguments, in spite of anything else, that they know I mean, this is my personal opinion, folks, you don't have to agree with me. They know at a soul level that it's all about love. I would like to say that I choose not to wait until I'm on my deathbed to get to that. And actually, it's quite interesting that some people do create physical illness and physical disease within the system that enables them to start exploring, to enable them to get to love themselves. I think one of the very first books I did on kind of metaphysical causes of illness was a chap called Dr. Bernie Siegel. And I think it's Love, Life and Miracles, it's called. And I would recommend anybody to read it. And that is a book about learning how to love yourself, and learning how the power of love, actually, over your physical and mental wellness. Because we are all love. I don't care what anybody says. We are all, at our core, we are love. Some of us are disconnected from that. Some of us have that mask that's in the way, but we are all at our core love. But we've been conditioned into so many other things. And I do mean we've been conditioned into it. And very much as you've said, I mean, we have now had 18 to 20 months of conditioning, of wearing masks, of building fear. And anything that causes fear is, in my definition, an untruth. Because fear is what, whenever I'm going into the next kind of our archetypes, which is the victim and the warrior. So if you are in fear, you are frequently in victim consciousness. The very fact that you believe that you can be, so many people at this moment are living in fear and are victim to the COVID pandemic. Now, before anybody says that there isn't one, I am well aware that there is one. And I worked as a nurse looking after residents right at the beginning in June, July of 2020. So I do know that it is real. And I do know that it causes a great deal of, that it causes physical illness. And I do know that it can cause death. I also know that social isolation can do the same. I also know that depression can do the same. I also know that, so when you're kind of talking cost benefits, that's what, to me, that's what we need to weigh up. I am not one of these that says don't do something. If you are someone that has a vulnerable immune system, then you look after yourself and you take care of it. What I would also say, though, is if you do have a vulnerable immune system, then at some stage in your life, there has been a kind of spiritual, physical event that has created that fear that then your body responded, because your body is listening in. Your body is listening in to your thoughts constantly. You can't, it's not just when you think something, it isn't just in your head, it is throughout your physical being is conscious. We have the same, we have I forgot the word for it, but we do have neurological cells in our heart. So our heart is conscious, and in fact, our heart energy can be measured far further away from the body than our brain energy can. So, and the key is to have them both connected. And people have recovered from stage 4 cancer with and without treatments. People have recovered from, people have had near-death experiences. People have, so it's kind of, it is complex. It is not pointing at somebody and going, you're poorly, it's your fault, because there is no blame. It is quite simply, it is a consequence of certain beliefs and patterns, and just as an example, in my recent work, well, my sister actually, because she was the lady that I was working, she was working with one of our clients, and you can go look at the testimonials. And this lady had fibromyalgia, and we looked at the way that she was a victim to the disease. And when we released the victimhood to the disease, within a month, we had an email, and there was some swearing in it. So I'll be kind of polite as I use it, because we're going on air and I don't know who's listening. And it was, by the way, I do normally swear. So, and it was that she said, "I cannot effing believe it. Here I am in my bathroom, having painted the walls of my bathroom white." So from being physically unable to move, do, act, she painted her bathroom in full instead of having to ask her husband. And she says the blank walls represented her new life, which I thought was absolutely fantastic metaphorically. And then she says, and I have just come back in from doing a 5-mile jog. Now that is somebody who less than 2 months previously had hardly been able to move because of a fibromyalgia. So when we're talking about what the power of the shadow, the beliefs that we take on, the consciousness that comes through, and the key one the key to getting it to change for anybody is the willingness to do the work to get rid of it. And and we do live in a society that can venerate illness. We do live in a society where people get a benefit from being ill. We do live, and I can always remember when I started my nursing, I worked with a lady called Brenda Skeeth, and it was kind of illness serves a purpose. So when, and I do my best not to reward illness behavior. I mean, I'm going to always give my grandkids a hug when they're not feeling well, but it's kind of, don't let them think that the only time that they get a hug is when they're not feeling well. It's so if you understand what I'm saying, it is about loving consistently as opposed to just doing it when and people will do it to get the attention, because if you don't get the attention from positivity, you will get the attention from the negativity. If you think about a child who throws a tantrum, if they think that they've not been if they've not been heard, if they've not been listened to, if they've not been, well, our body throws a tantrum and our body creates an illness and kind of goes, right, I'll make you take notice of me. And we do and I mean, I used to do it mentally as opposed to physically. Poor me. I can't do that. And I still, actually, it's fascinating talking to you all now and saying this, because I'm recognizing it as a pattern that I have been creating in relation to getting older. Because as a pattern of creating it to getting older, I have seen so many people grow old, and I have seen so many people grow weaker. And in actual fact, the notion of getting older and weaker are two separate things, but we have them tied together. And I am in the process personally of working through the consciousness that goes with that my beliefs around getting old versus and getting weaker. And it was just last week, I think I was sat watching TV with my daughter, and it was America's Got Talent. And there was this 73-year-old female bodybuilder came on, and I thought, I've got my role model. Because a lot of us don't have those role models to follow. And so the role models that we follow are the ones that we've seen. So if your mother became ill at a certain age, it's amazing how many times some of the children will become ill at a certain age. It's the kind of thing where we go, oh, we all have allergies in our family, or we all get hay fever in our family, or we all get, because the patterns that we just accept. And I mean, I just think about one chap who was one of my staff in one of the nursing homes. He used to, whenever he was kind of getting, when things were happening, he'd go, I can't get my breath. I can't get my breath. I mean, in these days of COVID, that's a bit of a risky one. And what he'd do, though, when he went off sick, guess what he went off sick with? Bronchitis. So when I say your body listens, your body does listen, and your body responds to what it's programmed to do. And a lot of us, and if there's one thing that anybody takes away from this evening is, if you have been responding in fear, adopt the warrior and choose to be in your warrior energy, which is the one that has your, so kind of, I take responsibility for my own health. I have my own back. I know that what I am capable of. I know that so I take my responsibility to look after me. And to be honest, the NHS is an absolutely fantastic service, and it has in some ways debilitated some of us. So the NHS is superb for emergencies. So, like if you have a stroke, if you have a heart attack, if you have an accident, if you've got injuries, if you've done, absolutely superb in all of those situations. But in the longer term situations, it can create that dependency, and it's not the NHS's fault. So again, I keep kind of going back to it can sound as though there's a blame that you do this, you do it. No, it isn't. It is just simply the results of the culture that we live in that then ends up influencing us in such a way as to what our expectations are and what they won't be. And it's going to be very interesting over this next couple of years to see what happens as the NHS is. I mean, when they tell you that when they tell you that the NHS is things to its limits, it has been at those limits every winter for the last at least 15 years. I can tell you that from my own personal experience, because I know that of the number of people that they would discharge from hospital to get those beds rolling. They had specialist discharge nurses so that they can get people discharged as quick as possible. They would fine social services if they couldn't get a place for somebody to go because of their not being able to free up a bed in the hospital. So and the notion of calling a patient a bed blocker, it's all of those things that kind of go with it. So there's so many different nuances, so many different aspects of it that, I mean, I think I could talk longer than an hour when I start. So thank you everybody for listening. But that's the victim mentality, the victim consciousness. And what's even more interesting about the victim mentality is when we are in victim mentality, whether we are aware that we're in victim mentality or not, because you will hear the words of victim all over the place. It's when you blame somebody else. It's not my fault, it's yours. This happened to me and it had nothing to do with me, and all of those. And oh, poor me, woe is me. Oh, I've got this ache. Oh, I've got that ache. Oh, my children don't love me. Or whatever it is that is coming at you. And when you are in fear and victim mentality, what will happen? Can you see my granddaughter doing a little peep here? When you are in victim mentality, you make poor decisions because you're making decisions from a position of fear as opposed to from a position of power and from a position of knowingness. And that takes me, and the knowingness is what comes from within. So one of the things that I see in people of faith is that no matter, and I don't mean, and I mean, they used to do it used to be on Radio 2 in the morning, and different people of different faiths came on and just did a 20-minute slot in the morning, and whatever denomination it was, those people later, Edie, those people would. They would come from such a place of loving whatever faith they had, but from that place of faith and from that place of love, that they had this peace and calmness about them, that they just knew that everything was going to be okay. And it doesn't matter what madness is going on around you. When you have that inner core and that inner peace, then you just know that everything is going to be okay. And so you don't need to operate from a position of fear. And I think it's Greg Braden who teaches a lovely technique for how to make your decision from the heart, which is does not do the fear, as opposed to the brain that is doing the worrying and the panicking and the thinking. And it is literally put your hand on your heart, think of the question that you want to answer, connect to your heart, take 3 or 4 deep breaths whilst you connect to that knowingness that is you, that's that internal you, that is your connection to God, however you interpret that connection to God, because we are all aspects of God. And when you connect to that, you then can make the decision from that place of love as opposed to the position of fear. And unfortunately, we have so many of us have had so much fear drilled into us, and if you've been watching the TV, it's practically, it's now impossible to avoid. You listen in the car radio, and they're talking about they're using fear to get people to take the vaccine, as opposed to doing a cost benefit of it. For it's like where children are concerned, children do not suffer from COVID. Adults do. So it's not the children that we need to protect. And when was the last time that we don't send children out into fields to fight for us as adults, to protect us? We are the adults, not children. So this is what I'm saying about when we kind of go for the thing about child consciousness. And so get out of fear. Get your hand on your heart, get your deep breath going, and get out of fear. It's one of the biggest things that I'd say as far as victim consciousness goes.
Wendy,
yeah,
well done.
Am I coming up to my time?
You are. You got over, but I'll let you
I'm
talk.
sorry.
I'll tell you what, that was really, really, really good. And
thank you.
Honestly, that was really, really good. But we're coming up to a time now where the people are in the saying, "Do we get the news? Do we get the news?" And all that lot. And I'm there
totally.
kind of like.
Totally. I didn't have a clock, you see, so I just kind of chat. So there's one that we're not mentioned yet, which is the saboteur and magician, but I can do that another day.
You will. Yeah, you can do that. We will get you back as soon as possible. Wendy, as always, thank you so much. That was really good.
Good.
Guys, don't forget to contact Wendy. And how can people contact you?
Yeah, and if anybody wants to contact me via Messenger and to ask any more and to find out about how I can be of help, then please feel free. Go on Facebook, ask to be a friend of Wendy Pather, and then get me messaged. No problem.
Thank you so much, Wendy. Thank you.
You're
See you
welcome.
soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.